Okay, time to talk about how to add music to film. It is really all about setting the mood and creating the emotional nuance necessary for the scene. How do you express the invisible aspects of the film? Emotion, nuance, emphasis, symbolizing characters as a leitmotif, adding tension? Well, you add music. There are major things to consider, though. The biggest is that the music must be thematically appropriate to the film. So if you're doing a Jane Austen style period drama, you probably don't want to use death metal. Some great examples of thematic use of music are in Kurosawa's film Ran and Evans' film Apostle. You can find these on Netflix. However, using discordant or incongruous music can be very, very effective for heightening tension or when used as a deliberate contrast. Park's film Lady Vengeance and Kubrick's film A Clockwork Orange both do this phenomenally using classical music. But let's talk about inserting musical cues. This is the DAW agnostic version. You will need to adapt these guidelines to your specific DAW. So start working on it, and we will go through this in detail in class. So you've already spotted the film, you already have a cue sheet knowing where the music will start. Your DAW should already be set to 48K, 24-bit, and at the frames per second standard that is used on your video. So, assuming that's good, turn off bars and beats and set the ruler to time codes. You can set bars and beats as a secondary ruler, but go to where you want each of those important musical cues to start and set a marker. Ideally, this will be a downbeat. Then you can make that a downbeat by setting the time signature manually at wherever that point is. That will automatically adjust to a downbeat in every DAW. Next thing to do is to create a region that lasts as long as the cue. So a dummy MIDI track is great for that. Something that is not going to have any data on it, but you can just draw out a long region in Reaper or Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools. Especially if you set it to an annoying or obvious color. I like red. It's really easy to see unless you have some sort of color blindness issue. If you do, use what works for you. But then draw it out so you have X number of bars at whatever your time signature is. You can then split the region at the logical endpoint and delete the remainder. Then you can make tempo adjustments accordingly, but make sure you are not warping the tempo of the movie. In Ableton, you have to go in and disable warping on the movie clip, and it will try and do this kind of by default. So to adjust the tempo accordingly, I recommend using the tap tempo feature in your DAW. You can also try and use detect tempo feature or beat identification, but your mileage may vary based on where you're creating identification points. Be very aware that you want to get this done in chronological order. Start at the beginning, go through, record your first cue, go to the next place, insert the starting marker, insert the tempo change, insert the region, record your second cue, go on to the third. Because any changes that you make to the tempo and length later will bump things down further down the timeline and they will get out of sync. You want to make sure that everything's done chronologically. Save frequently. Control S, Command S. You should do that any time you make a major change that you are satisfied with. Then, move on to the next cue and create regions until everything is mapped. So a couple of considerations. This is a short film clip that you're working with. Ideally, it is one complete scene. In that case, you can get away with one DAW session. feature films, it's typically one DAW session per cue. So if you had multiple cues per scene, you would have multiple DAW sessions, even though it's the same scene. If you do need multiple cues all in one timeline, Reaper has a project called Subprojects. This is a great feature where there's one parent timeline, and then you can insert the subproject children for each cue. This is really great for organizing things into subprojects, into subfolders that are independent, so you can make changes to length and tempo without affecting other things. There's a link to the Reaper forum post and tutorial on how to use these. If you're using Reaper, I strongly recommend you look at that if you're going to be doing a lot of work with film in the future, because it's a really, really cool concept that is not available in other DAWs.